Sweet. Well, what's up, everybody? Excited to be here with you guys tonight. We got a little bit of a we're gonna have two-part call here, basically. So Kevin's in transit at the moment, and so I'm gonna get us started and go for a little while. And it may just be that that we just take it on home, or he might join us here towards the end of the call. But either way, super excited for you guys to be with us. And yeah, should be kind of a good call tonight. And again, if you're joining us, if you're watching the replay, if you found us on YouTube, hopefully this is something that no matter what season of life that this finds you in, there can be a couple of ideas right now that you can use to help move the checkers forward with you yourself and your life and your vision. And so kind of going into the fall season, like I'm a really, really big believer, and we'll kind of preface it with this, is I'm a really big believer that, there are seasons of life, of course, right? There, just as there are seasons of weather and patterns, right? And so it's like we have the natural seasons of the weather, and that's particularly true if you're looking at farming, or if you're looking at agriculture, if you're looking at just the natural pace at which things evolve, at which things bloom, at which things harvest. And then you have those seasons, of course, in your life. And now the seasons in your life may not always be parallel to the seasons of the world. But one of the things that I think is interesting is that if you become aware of this concept, then sometimes the different times of year can mirror different thoughts that you might be having. So right now we are here and entering into the fall, into the autumn, which is typically a time of harvest, and it's typically a time of also preparation, and it's a time before winter, as we go into winter, and then of course go into oftentimes in the fall too, depending on what type of seed you're sowing or what type of harvest you're doing. You're going to do some seeding right now before the winter comes, before the cold weather, before the snow comes, and then of course that's going to kind of start the process as the spring comes and the summer, and going in again to the planting and the sowing and the harvesting yet again. And so in our life we do the same things. We invest ultimately energy into the things that matter to us, things like our relationships. We invest into our family. We invest into our body and our health. We invest into our businesses. We invest in our money itself to create and grow more money. And then depending on what type of income that you are practicing, whether it is linear income or whether it is growing an actual enterprise, there of course are those gestational periods of sowing and planting seed. And so that can mean different things in different businesses. In some businesses that can mean advertising. In some businesses that can mean growing infrastructure. In some businesses that can mean investing in staff, right? And in our business, this means two things to me, and this is what we're going to kind of get into right now, is that the first thing that this means getting squared up, or getting clear about what it is that you're actually shooting for, what it is that you're trying to create. Because this is a business where it can literally be as small or as big as you choose to make it, right? You can use this as a vehicle to go out and to gather up a couple of customers and share a product with people, so that you can basically get product that you enjoy consuming for yourself for free. This can be something that you can use to tack on a little bit of extra income to your household on an annual basis to help pay for a little bit of extras, right? Maybe take the family on a trip, maybe pay for an extra car, stuff like that. This is something that you can use, and you can basically employ the strategy of leverage to build massive teams to go out and create massive cash flows. But whatever is going to come of this usually comes as a result of what you are casting a vision for in the beginning. Very, very few people that have gone to the highest levels of this have done so without having a vision, a compelling vision for a better future, a compelling vision for something that may seem at some point in our lives unattainable, and then they certainly shoot for that. And now I'm here to say also that it's like your major vision, your massive vision may not ultimately be what your vision was when you started out. Met and have been around so many people that got started simply because they wanted to add an extra income to their family. They started because they simply just needed to pay for some car repairs. They started because they simply wanted to just buy a nicer SUV for the family. They started because they wanted to take a vacation and they haven't been able to for a long time. And then suddenly, as they started to have progress and growth, then that vision started to expand. And all of a sudden, these people who once just were trying to figure out a way to make ends meet suddenly find themselves in a position where they have a global, multiple seven-figure business. And so it can happen in so many different ways. But what I wanted to really get into tonight is the idea that so many people, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been meeting people and having this conversation of, your why, having this conversation of, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you have your ideal lifestyle be like? If you could, achieve your dreams, what would that look like? And I've been asking people this question on and off since basically about 2008. And you wouldn't believe the amount of different answers that you get. And the thing that I've learned more often than not is that whether it's a result of how people were brought up, or whether it's a result of just the different environments that they've been in, or whether it's a result of, their own personal doubts, or whether it's a result of experiences and letdowns that happen in life, right? The disappointments. It's that so many people not only shrink their dream, but people get to the point where they're not even sure that they have a dream. And what's so interesting is that when you ask people like, dude, if you could have it all, what would that look like? And people will tell you things like, oh man, I would just make, X amount a month, and it'll be some number that's kind of small. And there's a great saying that goes around that says basically like, when you get to the end and you look back, the thing that you'll realize is that life would have paid whatever price you would have asked of it. And so I think about that often as I think about, if you had a genie basically that was like, hey, how much money do you need to live your dreams? And you're like, well, I think I could get it done for, insert X here. And he's like, okay. And you're like, wow. And you're going along, and then you have that new thing and it's pretty cool. And you're like, whoa, but I guess it's pretty good. Right. And the genie is just sitting there like, well, dude, you could have asked for like 10 times more. And like, I would have granted that wish. And that, I think, is so much more available to us than we often think. The one thing I've learned from meeting and observing so many successful people is that it's not necessarily that they had so much more skill. It's not necessarily that they had such a bigger dream. It's just that they simply got started, and they simply learned how to do the work, and they simply worked at it day in and day out. Now, the reason that I explain all of this is because after having so many of these different conversations over the years, it dawned upon me at some point that it's not that there isn't a spark within people. It's not that, like the idea that something could be better isn't something that resonates with everybody. But the problem is that for the reasons that I listed before, life happening, people's dreams getting crushed, people trying opportunities and it not coming through, life just getting full and busy, and there being too much money in the money, and life coming at you and getting fatigued and getting tired and getting, just basically numb. It's super easy to get to the point, and I see this in people all around, and I can even myself at times, and it's very distressing, is the idea that, like, I don't even know what it is that I want. And so the theme, and this has all been kind of a long-winded way to get here. So if you're following me, the theme is this, is that sometimes what we need to do, and sometimes what we need to help people do, is not necessarily help them, paint this picture of a dream. But what we can actually do is we can start by helping ourselves get clear about the things that we don't want to have happen. And you always say, well, don't focus on the negative. And, you don't want to think negative thoughts, and you don't want to picture things that aren't good. But sometimes our imagination gets so muddied, our imagination gets so cloudy, that the only way to get to the point where we can start to get some clarity is to get very, very clear about the things that we don't want. And so that might look something like this. It might look something like, you know what? I don't want to be sick and feel terrible. Now, by stating that alone is not enough to get us pointed in the right direction, but it's a starting point. Because what we can do is, as soon as we get clear and specific about the what we don't want, what is not kind of part of our master plan, we can now use that to take the 180 and get pointed at a statement that starts to get clarity about what it is that we actually do want, right? So if you say to yourself, okay, Like, imagine that I'm asking you this, or imagine that you're sitting across from somebody and you're asking them, and they're like, well, I don't really know if I want to do something like this, or I don't really know what I'm going to do, or I don't really know what I want, or I don't really know where I want to live, or I don't really know where I want to travel, or I don't really know where I want to, what I want to drive, or I mean, I don't really know. You can just ask this and say, well, let me ask you this, if you get 10 years down the road from now and you had a financial emergency for a couple $1,000s, would you like to be able to take care of that? Or would you like to, just like have no plan whatsoever and have to like rely on the government for it? And a lot of people would be like, well, I don't want to rely on the government. And say, cool, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is being financially independent. So that's the first thing that you can start with. You say, okay, well, in 10 years, and this is just an example, but in 10 years, I'd like to be financially independent to the point where if I had a $5,000 unexpected expense, I could take care of it, no problem. And then you go a step further from that. You say, in 10, 15, 20 years, let's say that you're 50 years old. You say, at 65 years old, would you like to not have enough money for retirement? People will be like, well, no, that would be terrible. I definitely don't want to not have enough money for retirement. Say, perfect. So what you're telling me is that at 65 years old, what you'd like to do is actually have an established retirement. So you have the choice if you want to retire or not. People, yeah, I'd like to have a nice retirement. Okay, great. Would you like to be driving a car that you're uncertain whether it's going to break down or not? Well, no, I don't want to drive a car like that. Maybe somebody says, well, I don't really care. So, okay, we'll skip on down. Right. And the point of this exercise is that if you start to look at this in all the different areas of life that ultimately happen, the well-being of our family, our ability to be financially independent, to be healthy, to be mobile, to have transportation, to have opportunities, to have, possibility in our lives, it gets pretty easy, pretty clearly, and pretty quickly to start to, even if you're sitting in a place today where you have no concept of what it is that you're actually shooting for, it starts to get pretty clear to say, okay, you know what? I don't want that. And so what I do want is the opposite of that. All right, I definitely don't want that either. So what I do want is the opposite of that. And so pretty quickly, what you can do, whether it's for yourself or whether it's somebody that you're sitting with, is that you can start to take some muddied waters and you can start to create a direction of clarity. Because then from there, we can start to say, okay, well, here's some actions that we can take to go forward to do that. Okay, you want to have a great retirement. So what's going to have to happen in order to have a great retirement? Well, you're going to have to start funding a retirement. And there's different ways to do that. It could be, funding a 401k, it could be funding a Roth, it could be trading in the markets, it could be building a real estate portfolio. But then somebody says, well, to do any of those things, I'm going to have to create excess, right? And now we're starting to get somewhere. It starts to get clear, right? And so the reason that I bring all this up is that now, if you work that exercise, my challenge for you is this, is that take a new action this week that you maybe haven't taken before. It doesn't have to be, like dramatic. It doesn't have to be anything, but take an action. And the first action I'm going to recommend, this is something that I read earlier today and I'm going to do tonight, is to say, spend 5 minutes tonight before you go to bed and write down a goal that you have for this week. Right. And it's like, and if you want to take that further, maybe this is the first week that you do that. Maybe it's the first time that you're thinking of it. I used to write down goals for the week all the time. I haven't been writing down goals for the week for a while, but I thought to myself, what are some things that I want to knock out this week? And then it immediately starts to get you thinking like, oh, okay, well, I could do this on that day and I could do this on that day. And so then it's like, oh, well, if I have this particular fitness goal, it's like, okay, well, I want to go walking, right? Like, oh, I definitely don't want to die sick and unhealthy, right? So I want to be healthier. Well, what's something that we can do for our health? We can drink our greens, right? So a goal for the week this week might say, hey, I want to drink my greens every morning when I get up. And I would say, make that simple step to write down a goal for this week. And if you're in a place where your vision does not feel clear, then use that exercise that I just described to start to write down maybe 5, 10, 15 things of the don'ts. And don't be afraid to do that for this one time, because on the other end of that spectrum, now you can start to generate clarity. Clarity creates consistency. Consistency creates positive outcomes, and on you go. So hopefully that made a little bit of sense. Hopefully that can be an exercise that can be of value. And I know Kevin just said that he switched so that he can jump in here and wrap it up a little bit. Kev, if you've got a second, go ahead. If you want me to keep going, let me know.
Hey, how's it going? I'm popping on. I appreciate that. I am in transit. We were helping somebody move today, and I got my inner construction worker going and covered in fiberglass insulation, but somebody's going to have a good roof. We can learn things. Um, we were talking retirement on that, and I started thinking that's really an interesting dream possibility when you think about the average median income in the United States is $31,000 a year. I do not understand how anybody can survive on that, but there are people out there doing that. And then you have to ask yourself, all right, if you retire at 65 years old, how much money do you need to live out the rest of your life with a $31,000 income? How much do you need to set aside out of every check that you make? And when you do the math, you realize you got to be a millionaire from working a $31,000 job. You will never be able to do that unless you employ leverage. I had an onboarding meeting this week, and we did a house party as well. And in the conversation, I asked a guy who had been building houses for almost 30 years. I said to him, I said, "Are you not where you want to be in life because you don't work hard?" And then I paused and waited. He goes, "I'm not sure." I said, "Man, you wake up at 4 in the morning to be at the job site by 5. You're the one that runs the risk of having your body get hurt. You're the one that's beating your body up in order to get uh, income." I got a kid waking up. You're gonna be all loud. I guess I got to go outside of that. And you think you process that, and it's like he does more than most people do. He wakes up, he's committed to more than most people are, and yet he works from sun up to sundown and it's not working. He needs leverage. You get leverage in a 401k, you get leverage in an IRA, you get leverage in a stock account, you get leverage in a real estate portfolio, but you get the most possible leverage in this type of business. It's like, what do we have to do? Well, if I'm you and I'm watching this video right now, there's a couple things. Number one, you can have an unlimited amount of customers. You just have to go talk to them and get them. Number two, you can have an unlimited amount of people go 3 by 3. Number three, you could have an unlimited amount of people underneath you getting a check that you get a 5% match on. 50% retail is a really, really powerful concept. And anybody that clicks into that concept so they can get their product free, hedge inflation, or maybe create a world-class retirement or income, they can do that over here. And if so, what's really interesting about that is the amount of leverage that it requires. I remember it when I built my first company. I got to work, I got going, and I got to the point where I was like, man, I think I talked to everybody that I know. And then I started talking to strangers, and that was really out of my comfort zone to talk to strangers, but I did it. And I kept talking to people that I would meet as I'd go places. And then some random person would pop into my head. I'd reach out to them and they're like, "I was looking for something. That's crazy. You would call me." And they'd end up joining. Well, it was never somebody that I got into the business that did really exceptional things. It was always somebody else they brought in. So there's this magic of getting lost in the work. And like maybe your goal or your dream isn't defined today, but it's really interesting to set a goal that says, hey, I just want to cover my car payment and my insurance. Hey, I just want to cover my phone bill and some gas. Hey, I just want to cover my mortgage. I just want to cover this. I want to cover that. Because at the core of it, the way that I see it is, if all of the vitamins are owned by the parent companies that are big pharma, and you're trying to be healthy and buying your stuff at the store, you've got to look into sourcing. And when you look into sourcing, you realize that you don't want a bunch of synthetics and it's just expensive urine. So when you start looking around for sourcing, you realize that like about a quarter of the stuff in health food stores, again, is synthetics, if not half. And they're owned by big pharma. And you start looking around and you're like, man, all these online things, some of them are fads, some have synthetics, some are sourced well, and it just kind of gets overwhelming. And you're like, I just want to protect myself as we go into flu season. I just want to make sure my family has good immunity. Immune system is 75% produced in the gut. Our gut health blends in our product are so profound that you will have a regulation within the gut. If you care about boosting your immune system, no illness can exist in a body that is slightly alkaline. and you get alkalinity from greens. The more green, the more alkaline. So if you consume our product daily, what ends up happening is your immunity box gets checked, your vitamin box gets checked, your minerals box gets checked, your alkalinity box could get checked, but your emotions have a lot to do with that as far as creating acid in the system. And so it's one of those things where if you have a big dream or you have a small dream, or if you don't have a dream, I would love to leave you tonight with a dream that could be yours. In a world where they want you diseased, dumb, dependent, misinformed, and ultimately dead, it's such a form of rebellion to help somebody heal themselves by giving them a simplified nutritional component that they can add to their daily regimen that becomes the foundation and building block for their immunity, for their body, their constitution, and ultimate wellness. And as a result of you helping someone else, and the Jewish people have a saying that says, save one life, save the world in time. And that goes along with the creed I live by, where it says, if you want to change the world, raise good children. And it says, if you want to raise good children, love your spouse, love their mother. And so I think to myself, like, if I want to raise good kids, I'm going to love the mother. If I want to change the world, I'm going to raise good kids, checking those boxes. But if you save one life, you'll save the world in time. And at the end of this life, 120 years from now, nothing you really did will matter except for those things that helped other people. So if you don't have a dream, I'd love to give you a dream. Why not get some bills paid? Why not get yours for free? Why not go get 3 customers, help them get 3 customers as practice for when you go 3 by 3? That'll get you your product free. And that's 3 people that will be better off because you got outside of yourself and helped someone else. And so I leave you with that. This is going to be an exciting week. We're gearing up towards the 27th. There's going to be a call where we unveil all this stuff we've been working on. That's going to be on the 27th of this month. So mark it in your calendars, and thank you for joining us tonight.